During the forthcoming broadcast, you'll notice that I refer to Arnold Yarrow, the actor who plays Bellal in Death to the Daleks, in the present tense, because he was alive and well when it was recorded. Sadly, since then, in December 2024, Arnold has passed away. He made it to 104, though, and was still as sharp as ever when he died. If you want to know more about him, please do go to the Guardian obituaries section of their website, and you'll find an obituary written there by me, in collaboration and with the help of Arnold's family, including his 100-year-old brother. What a family, what a life. I think there'll also be mention of another Doctor Who centenarian herein, Donald Pelmier, who played Professor Rubish in The Time Warrior, and again, sadly, Donald has since died. Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, watch a Doctor Who story chosen by a friend of mine. I drop in facts, observations and comments, all the while trying to guess what my special guest's favourite thing about each episode might be.
Hi, my name's Dom Woodward. I'm a comedian, a magician, an actor and a Doctor Who fan. The story I've chosen to talk about is Death to the Daleks.
Well, hello, this has been a delight talking about Death to the Daleks, which I would have definitely had down as nobody's particular favourite story, but thanks to the ability I have to communicate with the people who hang around Patreonville as I record this, because I haven't done this in one go, I've done it episode by episode, uploaded it to Patreon and got, instant feedback. And it's been rather delightful to hear how many people have this story held in a sort of special place for them. And it's partly, I think, to do because of it being one of the early VHSs. I mean, I remember it coming out and very excitedly reading about it in Doctor Who magazine, but also knowing I probably wouldn't get it because there would be others that I would get. I think I thought, Daleks, and, it was known as not being a classic. And, one had to really ration what one got in those days. And as I've said before, it was one that it was when I was finally watching Doctor Who stories. I was getting one every few days by this point, mopping up the stories I hadn't watched. So, I went into it not expecting much, and came out of it, neither surprised nor disappointed, and didn't really think much of it. And over the years, I've kind of thought it was okay, but more recently, I've had a great time with it, and I've really enjoyed watching it this time. Although not to the extent of it's an unappreciated classic. I think its problems are manifest, but nonetheless, there's plenty to talk about. Some of its shortcomings are sort of unusual for Doctor Who, really, and the characters aren't all that great, and there's a lot of repeated Terry Nationisms and that sort of thing, but it does have lots to recommend it. So let's hear what everybody said in response to episode 3, in order that we go into episode 4 with lots of different opinions rattling through our head before we see the outcome of the Doctor's encounter with the mosaic of doom. So Peter the Speaker says, are the Exelons, this is a good point, are the Exelons the only race in Doctor Who where clothing is optional? Because yes, the savage ones, the ones who just sort of incant or shamble along the planet being slave work fodder, at least cover their modesty, whereas the clever ones and the benign ones, the Bellals and the Gotals and that other one that was non-speaking on film that was also played by Roy Heyman. I got too bogged down in that last week, so let's leave that there. They've obviously evolved into being creatures of reason, kindness, and intellect, but also naturism, because Bellal is absolutely starkers. So that is very true. Although Nick Mellish points out to Peter, who knows what went down on Spyrodon, and that is very, very true. What happens in Invisible Club stays in Invisible Club, I guess. Rob Davidson says, it occurs to me on this rewatch that the Michael Wisher Daleks have a notably prissy and officious tone, which makes them sound like pedantic little bureaucrats pushing their weight around, rather than ruthless killing machines. Perhaps the ship that crashes on Exelon was in fact the Dalek B Ark, transporting all the junior officials, the HR team, the estate agents and traffic wardens, who the Hawkins skeleton Daleks couldn't wait to get kicked off Skaro. Rob, I like that point. I think that's a very good observation. This is all the Dalek civil servants. Haha. Oh, I need to point out, if we're talking about Dalek shortcomings, my own, I think I've played this game badly. I chose Bellal last week, and I think I should have chosen Elizabeth Sladen's reactions to him, because I talked a bit about that, but her scared yet brave, her flinching yet not wanting to be rude, an actor conveying two or three different things at the same time that, you know, when you sort of say it out loud, sound as if they're contradicting each other or conflicting, but actually human beings' reactions are a mixture of different things and sometimes contrasting things, and I think that is the intelligence of Elizabeth Sladen's approach to the craft, in that she will often do two things at the same time that seem counterintuitive but actually make her more human, and, you know, really importantly, especially in the way that television was filmed at the time, make it interesting to watch. So she's worth her weight in gold. She is quite brilliant. So I think I should have chosen that for last week and kept Bellal in my back pocket, because I don't know, this week I'm slightly worried about what I might choose. Look, I might get blown away by episode 4, but I'm not sure. But I've got to choose an overarching thing for the whole thing, which again might be Bellal. So yeah, I've got to choose two things this instalment, and I'm slightly worried, if I'm honest. Chris Williams says, really glad you mentioned Elizabeth. Oh, here we are. Really glad you mentioned Elizabeth Sladen's acting here. I didn't just say that because I was expecting this. Watching it the other day, I was struck by that split second when she touches Bellal's arm and then instinctively looks at her hands like a reflex. It's a tiny but real detail that sells Sarah as a person and adds authenticity to the scene. That's why she made such a connection with those of us who grew up with her. We absolutely believed in Sarah Jane Smith, thanks to her skills as an actor. Chris, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that's a really nice moment that is at around the time that I was just discussing as well. Tiny bit real detail, Chris. That's exactly the sort of stuff that she does. So you and I are in accord there. You could have been, you were very polite. You could have said, why didn't you choose that, you idiot? And I'd have taken it. David Gillespie Pratt says, at least the floor tiles of death bring a bit of colour. It's a very brown and blue story, so a bit of vivid red is most welcome. That's very true. And yes, I'm not sure. I think L. Rowland Warren, the costume designer, liked blues. I think of Planet of the Spiders, well, of course, because Metebelis 3 is blue, but John Pertwee a very sort of blue sapphire hue as well, and I'm not sure it's the best colour for science fiction, but L. Rowland Warren seems to like it. I must say, yes I must, says David, that the Dalek colour scheme, though, is one of their best. Much better than the battleship grey we get for most of the 70s. Yeah, I like the Dalek colour scheme in this, and I agree. I know that the battleship grey is a sort of classic look, but, well, I've got a Dalek outside my I'm not going to call it a studio, outside my cupboard that I'm in, and there's a reason I've got the Evil of the Daleks silver, blue and black-hatted livery, because the 70s looks aren't quite so good for me. And yeah, I do think the Dalek livery in this is attractive and works, and I prefer it too to the battleship grey, which I know is sacrilege in some parts because that is a classic look. Steve White says, ooh, the Lino of Doom. For what it's worth, I've always thought Elizabeth Sladen's acting in the scene where she meets Bellal was outstanding. Another person inferring that that's what I should have chosen, and you're quite right. Her mannerisms display such a subtle attention to detail without them getting in the way of her performance. Brilliantly put, Steve. I agree. Hopefully that makes sense. It does. It makes perfect sense, Steve. I probably tried to say something similar, but ummed and ahed and disappeared disappeared down an alleyway. Brave and Scared at the same time really does cover it, yes. And I did say that, but that's only because that's what Barry Letts said about her audition for the role. But yeah, it's as good a descriptor as any. Thanks, Steve. Nick Mellish says, Nick's already replied to Peter, so this is his second appearance this week. Nick says, I may be the first and only person who, upon watching Hamlet for the first time, went, that's from Death to the Daleks, instead of the other way round. Oh, yes, a hit, a very palpable hit. Ha ha ha. Well, it's also from Silver Nemesis as well, because Lady Painfort says it too. Christopher Meredith says, I've always been fond of this story, ever since getting the VHS when I was 13, even though I can see the faults in it. But I've been enjoying watching it recently. Part 1, yes, part, is probably the best one in the story, with it being all moody and atmospheric. And I'm sorry, but yes, my 13-year-old self did notice Sarah Jane in a swimsuit. I didn't really talk about that because I'm above such things. And I wish they'd killed off the best actor, John Abernethy. I think he means they hadn't. And I wish they hadn't killed off the best actor, John Abernethy, so early on. But Bellal just about makes up for it. As everyone else has said, my 13-year-old self, noticing the swimsuit aside, Elizabeth Sladen has really got to grips with her character by this time. She is just utterly beguiling in her scenes with Bellal. Arnold Yarrow is fabulous as well. Long may his reign as the oldest living Doctor Who actor continue. I love the scene with the Exelon and Dalek catching on fire by the lovely Root. Don't know what that says about me. No, I like that too. You want a bit of action, that's why. Even though my 13-year-old self noticed her as well, it was probably the hair. Joy Harrison is probably the least of the cast, but as you said, that's more the fault of the writing than her. It's only because I like Joy. I don't actually think she's that great in it either. Duncan Lamont is very good, and the rest of the cast are all right. The cliffhanger to this ep is pretty bad. I like the ones for 1 and 2, but I'm still enjoying the story. So he's commenting on 3 here, so he's talking about the Mosaic of Doom. By the way, read what you said, unless I misconstrued. Well, it's what I said. Yes, I'm reading it. It's what John Deere said. I haven't gone and checked. John Deere came in with his size 4s. No, they're not very big, are they? Anyway, about Destiny of the Daleks had the episode opening credits. And Chris points out, again, I haven't checked, but this does ring a bell too. Destiny goes story title writer and episodes 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I think John said that they swapped the order, but that it was Androids of Tara that had the opening credits, story title part, and writer. That's right. So, John, you came to help, and you had incorrect bandages. Also, The Evil of the Daleks, episode 2. Yes, now I know this because I think I commented upon it. Maybe just in my own head, because I did. I gave them the titles for the animation. I gave them the instructions for what order the titles go in. That's one of the things I do for the animations is that I make sure the titles are in the correct order. So yes, Evil of the Daleks is correctly anomalous in that it goes Evil of the Daleks episode 2, David Whittaker, but the other episodes don't seem to do that, and we get that from the telesnaps, I think, generally, and maybe the shooting scripts. So yes, I did know that, and I'd forgotten. And I knew it to the extent that I ensured it was replicated on the animation. By the other way, what you said in the previous episode about John Abernethy and Arrows wasn't said by Michael Bryant, who does his usual good job in this. It was said by you. Oh, me. Thanks, Christopher. He cast him, and you wrote to him. So Michael cast John Abernethy, and I wrote to John, unless you've got ideas above your station. Anyway, right. So the story about the arrows comes from me, and I mention it to Michael in the commentary. Okay, I did write to John. I've also spoken to both of his sons, so that Arrows story may have come from one of the Abernethy juniors as well, if not John himself, though I did correspond with John too, and so not from Michael Bryant. Okay, so that anecdote I ascribed to Michael Bryant actually comes from the storehouse of Haydock. Anyway, sorry for this being another long message. Don't be sorry, Christopher. It's always lovely to hear from you. I shall now go to the High Priest of Exelon and sacrifice myself. That'll stop me from sending long messages to Tar. No, always send long messages. So keep away from the woozy smoke stuff and send all the messages you like. Paul Goodridge says the first old Doctor Who story I ever saw, having watched seasons 23 onward on broadcast. My gran took me to rent a film and they had Death to the Daleks, but for sale only. I was desperate to borrow it, so the cashier took pity on me and let my gran rent it even though she wasn't supposed to. As a result, I've always been fond of it, even if it's a little nation by the numbers. But that's what it's all about, isn't it? You came to it in a special way, so you will always be fond of it. And I'd just like to raise a glass to that cashier. I wonder what they've been doing since then and now, and have probably forgotten that little moment of kindness they bestowed on the young Paul Goodridge. But isn't that nice that there are people like that in the world? I like a story like that of simple kindnesses that can really stick with us, and have obviously stuck with you, Paul. And I think that's why it pays to try and be nice if you can, because that, a small act can have great resonance, and a casual cruelty can have equal resonance. Anyway, let's not get all blooming our tune. David Matthewman says, I'm prone to sentimentality, I do apologise. David Matthewman says, thanks for giving me a reason to rewatch Death to the Daleks, which is not a story I revisit often, but I'm really enjoying it. I'm pleased, David. I'm happy if that is an outcome of this podcast. I must speak up in favour of the often derided cliffhangers, all of which for me fall into the category of cliffhanger that gets you tuning in next week to find out what was going on in the last few moments of the episode, which for me is an entirely valid form. Fair enough, David. This is doubly true of the end of part 2, where both the Root and Bellal are glimpsed so briefly that it's difficult to get a handle on what it is that you're looking at, especially since both are completely new to the story at that point. Yeah, good point. And I can confirm, says David, that for 7-year-old me and my friends in the school playground on the following Monday, it was clear that there was something very wrong with the Dalek guns. So contrary to what I said, all right, David, I was there at the time, Matthewman. Just from the cliffhanger to part 1, not only was the visual effect absent, but the slightly liquid slurping sound they made was wrong too. So we were desperate to watch next week to find out what was going on. Oh, cool. So I'm glad it still was an effective cliffhanger for you. That's nicely put. It casts those cliffhangers in a different light, and it's always good to hear from people who were there at the time. I, alas, wasn't. Well, no, I was, but I was approximately 2 months old when this started, so I was in my second to third month, so I could well have been watching. My mum might have breastfed me to the strains of Carey Blyton's comic oboe of doom, but who knows. But no, I'm familiar with it only from later watchings when I was much further into my Doctor Who experience. But I'm now going to watch it for my pleasure and for yours, and to see if I can choose. I mean, I've lost with Dominic. I haven't chosen any of the same things as my lovely friend Dominic Woodward, who's also an excellent comic and magician and children's entertainer, and all round he's just one of those sort of positive, cheerful guys. Dom, he's a lovely chap. And he's got a lovely energy about him. So I'm not going to win, but let's see if I can. I mean, can I choose any? Can I choose anything that he chooses? Let's see. Let's pull up a chair, Toby. So that's probably what you can hear there. And I am going to press play on Death to the Daleks in 3, 2, 1. Well, Death to the Daleks, Part 4, of course. So, yeah, it's because we've started now to go through the city of the Exelons. I sort of think of this as largely disposable, when we get into solving puzzle territory. But let's see how effective it is. And yes, obviously this was not the intended cliffhanger. So, well done for them cobbling something together, I suppose. Yeah, look at that. It is a test. I mean, it's sort of random sci-fi Jeopardy, isn't it? And we have a similar thing with the chessboard in the Five Doctors, which actually was a sequence I absolutely adored as a child and watched over and over again, because we had the Five Doctors was often shown when we'd done sport and stuff at school, and it was a story I got quite familiar with. But and I always kind of went, I'm not sure the pie thing makes any sense, and hopscotch. I love the fact that that's Doctor Who, isn't it? Clashing the deadly. Not only does it clash the ancient with the modern, the scary with the funny, you've got the sort of deadly, these deadly floor tiles with, the most benign and playgroundy and nostalgic and simple and naive childhood game of hopscotch, which I think is rather nice. We'd be furious, wouldn't we, if I like the fact the Doctor's boots are dirty as well. That they've gone to the trouble of ensuring they do look like they've come in from outside. We'd be furious, wouldn't we, these days, going, the sonic screwdriver, it's just supposed to open doors. And look at it now, it can solve a deadly floor puzzle. I love the little bits of body language that Arnold Yarrow does as well as Bellal. He's making the effort to try and sell him as a creature with slightly different movements and body language from presumably how Arnold Yarrow himself would move. There we go. Well done. And now he's going to demonstrate that he's very elegant, Pertwee, isn't he? Even when he's actually has to check 2 or 3 different pockets, he's not patting them absent-mindedly. He's got a real elegance about him. Oh dear, and it's a fairly straightforward spark effect, but it does the job, I suppose. And it makes a hole in the floor, but I think the implication, isn't it, that this that it repairs itself, and that ties, even though we don't see it. Those inclined to look for mistakes might go, oh well, it's a continuity error because we saw it blow a hole in the floor. But I think the whole point of this city is that whatever it does, it then repairs itself. It's organic, which I don't isn't hugely reflected in the design, and they've. This and the mosaic floor really does stick out as well. There's been no attempt to sort of make it look like a trap. It is like a sort of anomalous section of the building. Oh yeah, look, the bullets have blown holes in the floor. Oh, is this where we see it? Oh no, I'd forgotten that. They just so the doctor tests it with his sonic screwdriver, and the Dalek just blows the electronic bits to bits. Okay, that's all right. I like the machine guns anyway. They make holes in the floor, and this is where it. Yes, okay, this is where it repairs itself to make it. I did think I'd got it in my head. As I say, I'm not hugely familiar with this story, but obviously I remember that bit. And last week, of course, we had the bit where they hid in the little side cave and when we're fired at, and I'd totally forgotten that bit. And there is a bit in this episode which I've only been reminded of because it was mentioned in one of the comments a couple of weeks ago, and because it's the placeholder of the episode on BBC iPlayer. But there's a bit in this episode that I always forget, a bit like when Captain Yates returns. It's this bit. So the bit when Captain Yates returns, having been brainwashed in the Green Death, and turns up in the lab, and I always go, oh yeah, I always forget that bit, and he's under brain control, isn't he? I always kind of forget this weird observer who looks like they're going to introduce a different dynamic to proceedings. That's the person who's going to be the end game of this trap-laden journey to the centre of the city, and actually turns out it'll turn out to be a dead body. But I always kind of forget that it's there. I remember that there are the mutant-y things that come out, but I always forget about that dead body because it doesn't really go anywhere. But because of that, it always is a sort of surprising and slightly weird bit that I go, oh yeah, and it unsettles me slightly because it is less familiar to me, because somehow my brain doesn't retain it. This is nicely done as sort of, nighttime in the studio, and it's nice that Sarah's able to come and communicate with Jill of the I mean, the family Tarrant, they don't have spread their seed through the universe, don't they? I mean, I think in the Terry Nation worldview, the Tarrants are a bunch of rutters because they seem to pop up everywhere. They no matter how virulent the space plague, the Tarrants will survive. Unless it's a plague that's spread in. Anyway, let's not get into that. But yeah, I like this because I think we'd probably get fairly bored with a lot of this. Try this door, do that, because we know that's just kind of getting in the way of us getting to our destination. So this figure that is observing them suggests that, well, the destination might have hidden terrors all of its own. So I think that's an effective way of making these rather sort of plodding bits. I think anyone familiar with this sort of thing will go, we know that this is just sort of random jeopardy, although that's rather good. Oh, sonic screw. Hey, 21st century sonic screwdriver is now something that can freeze gun-toting Exelons. I thought you were just a screwdriver or can open a door. It's a very RTD sonic screwdriver, isn't it? And I love the way that Pertwee grabs him as well. He's always, he always has the concern as well, and that's quite scary. The fact that lovely Bellal can get overtaken. But look how Pertwee. Oh, I love the fact he puts his arm around him too. Pertwee gets a lot of stick for being a bit mean, but I think I've mentioned this before, that I do think I like the way he treats aliens. I think sometimes Doctor Who, if it's not careful, can be a bit patronising about its aliens, or treat or other them, and the way that Elizabeth Sladen did it was actually very different and very interesting and very human and works. But I really do like the way that Pertwee treats aliens with dignity and friendship. It's one of his. It's one of his big assets, I think. That's nice Dalek movement there, and this is very nice lighting. Beautiful exterior. The lighting's actually been pretty strong in all of this story because, of course, I like the fact there's a little bit of green there to the side of the building as well. The story has taken its visual look from the fact that this is a planet that has drained energy, and now we've got this set at night time. There's a lovely bit of special sound as well that's whipping up a chill. I can sort of feel the oppressive environment of Exelon, and planets that are dangerous environments is very 60s Doctor Who, is the Doctor Who that Terry Nation helped to create, where it's not just what happens on the place that the TARDIS takes you, it's the very place itself. I'm sure I mentioned that in episode 1, that idea. We're much less about hostile environments now in Doctor Who. We sort of take the A's and the A's to B's that we go from and to very much in our stride, because it's we would be bored actually pretty quickly if every time before the story could get on we had to take into account the environment. That's why we don't wear spacesuits, isn't it? It's why we don't put helmets on it. It's more likely that many of the places we would visit would have atmospheres that would burn us alive or suffocate us, but it would be very tedious if the first 5 minutes of every story was them going through different drawers and going, yes, Doctor, we need to wear the suits for planets that are below zero temperature and have an oxygen content of blah blah. We just have to hope that most of the planets that we land on are habitable by humans, which is hugely unlikely. But at least this kind of thing that they do in mostly the 60s, but this is a hangover from that. So to go, well, it's they're not all holiday destinations. And I think here's the skeleton. Here's a dead person, a dead Exelon by the looks of the clothing. The doctors guessed that the ultimate test will be an assault on our sanity. Are they going to show them Orphan 55? But there's a skeleton there, and a bit like the mosaic on the floor. it's kind of looks like it's been plonked there. I think the interior design of the city is perhaps a bit sloppy. Well, no, sloppy suggests an attitude from the designer, which it's not my place to impute or interpret. But I don't think it's altogether successful, really. I think it's a building that's supposed to have all of these properties to it, so it's rather bland interior. And there's no reason why it shouldn't, I guess, have a bland interior. But it does mean that any additional things required per scene, the scary floor, the dead body, look like they've been sort of, chucked on at the last minute, because they don't really fit into it. And of course the skeleton's not supposed to, because it's somebody that's there that's been hanging around. But it does just look like a bit of sort of late added set dressing. I don't know if I've articulated that particularly well, but I don't think the design of the interior of the city is the story's strongest point. It's a hard ask, though. It's a bit like a Bob Baker and Dave Martin thing, where they want some sort of Never Never Land on a BBC budget. I don't know what they could have done that could have been any different. I was thinking something organic, but then again, I do like the exterior with its very straight lines, because that is a contrast to the burn, the well-worn rocks of the planet itself. See, that's a really effective moment. We've had that eavesdropper who we thought might turn around and go, Doctor, you've come at last. But actually, he's been long dead, and like the Martians in the Quatermass and the Pit, when they open the bulkhead to find the dead Martians within, the filthy London air comes in and starts to make them decay, which has a nice little bit of science to it, and adds to the urgency. And here it gives us that moment. And I think it is a lovely bit of science that, as a watching child, you might ask about, or you might even know about, and go, oh yeah, I know, because that was shut and that had a vacuum and there was no air, and now the air's going. But what it does, that it confounds our expectations a little bit. It means that we're expecting this person to mean something, this person who was watching the Doctor and what he was up to, and actually, sadly, and that's quite a it's quite a profound thing as well, is that they've been dead long before we even got here. And so again, now we're going to have, two conveniently placed sort of booths for the two extras we can afford to come out, who again I think are supposed to be kind of organic. But then we've got this electronics here, and again it seems like we've got the two circuit boards, which are what we could sort of plonk in. So as I say, it's almost like if you were doing a scene at a dinner table, but the only thing on the dinner table was the glass that somebody refers to because they had a line about a drink, and a piece of shepherd's pie that somebody refers to because they got a line about shepherd's pie, and they haven't bothered to put anything else in. That's just my feeling of that. Whereas I think the model is very nice. I think this wind is nice. They have bothered to put the wind machine on to ruffle the hair, to suggest that these guys are high up, and the camera is a little bit low. I'd have maybe probably liked it a little bit lower than that even, but we're shooting from underneath them to give the impression of height. And yeah, they look cold and they look grimy. They look like they've been again, the sort of the blue doesn't really help. They don't look like sort of fatigues. They don't. Was that a slightly wonky top there to the city beacon. And here we have one of my favourite things. It's a very Terry Nation thing, but it's a thing of all drama, of the one who's not a good guy. He's not been bad because he's evil. He's been bad because he's not very nice, because maybe he's a bit hard-nosed. Maybe he's lost touch with his humanity because he's grown up in a world of war. But inherently, underneath, he is brave, and he will do the decent thing, to the extent that he will actually be braver than some of us. Now, here is, yes, I mean, to add, it is already a story called Death to the Daleks. It is a story where their power is taken away from them, where they, they have to survive on their wits and suffer several ignominies, and the self-destruct of the Dalek is an addition to the list of yes, ignominies that the Daleks have to endure in this story. It's not one of Doctor Who's finest moments. I can see what they were aiming for. They go, well, the Daleks, they're not like us. If a human guard lets somebody go, he might be told off or given some extra training, or in a really harsh military regime, might be punished or court-martialed, but you wouldn't have to kill yourself. So it's a way of expressing the alienness of the Dalek, but it's awkward. It's funny because these antibodies or whatever they are. How do you design an antibody again, especially in a city that looks like this? So. But these are sort of quite organic. They're not a bad design. They look like sort of melty faced men. But they're supposed to be antibodies. I like the fact as well we see the bullet impact. That's very good. But also one of them, kicks a chair, and they've got quite attitude, haven't they? And pulls the Dalek's gun out and snaps it. But it's like a sort of odd mix, because there's nothing particularly wrong, I suppose, with the antibodies being men in suits who are sort of zombified, but it just, nothing within this city quite gels, and it does smack a little bit of that'll do, and different people coming in with different ideas, and nobody quite... Nothing quite coalescing. It looks like each different department's brought a different bit to proceedings. But I do like the fact that they go to the effort of having the impact of the bullets. I like the fact that they're sort of a bit dusty. They are slightly cadaverous, which I rather like, because I'm always anything that smacks of the walking sort of dead and zombies and things within Doctor Who seems a bit more horror and a bit more grown up to me, and I was desperate for that sort of thing. So I think as a kid I'd have enjoyed those as monsters. I just think they don't mesh with the design as well. I've talked. The city is a funny one, and the zombies are one of them's, I think, Terry Walsh, and the other one's definitely Steve Ismay, who's still about. Steve, he's a sort of Cockney geezer, and he's good fun. He's one of the last men standing of those Cockney boys. I should drop him a line, actually. He knew all the extras. Lovely bloke, loved a drink. He says about when you ask him about someone. He's a nice bloke, Steve. Very unaffected, very straightforward. It's a reasonable shot, isn't it, of the Dalek spaceship and the entrance. It's quite a clever use of resources, of having, that's presumably mostly blue screen with the door going in. I think is the picture of the Doctor and Bellal that they have from a sort of right angle to that. It's one of the publicity studio pictures, and as I say, Bellal looked a bit more sort of scary and alarming in the black and white pictures, but when he moves and speaks, he doesn't have that scariness at all. John Pertwee, I know, rather fancied Jill. In fact, I know quite a few people who fancy Jill Tarrant. She always has she does have a vaguely sort of baffled look on her face for most of proceedings. She's not quite sure what she's supposed to be doing, I think her face is. Again, excellent lighting here. This is shadowy and, as I say, the story helps with that, because it is about a lack of energy. But I think that really helps. I think Derek Slee deserves some credit for the lighting. And the power returns, and don't we get the boom, boom, I suppose that music is trying to be sort of, but I don't know what the expressions on Joy's face are supposed to be conveying. But I do love it. She's a very, very lovely lady. But yeah, I'm not sure what she's supposed to be thinking. I love the way that Bellal is cowering, and Sarah's looking after him. I think that's really sweet. And this is pretty grim, isn't it? That the Daleks, you think, oh, this is a cop out because they leave them alive, because that's crap, isn't it? When I shall kill you, but first I have some more important business. Or but no, they could kill them now, but as far as they're concerned, they're going to do it in a much nastier way, and you could almost infer that there's a little bit of cruelty to that, but of course, which means that actually it's clever scripting, because it means that we don't have the thing of going, oh well, why don't they just kill them? Oh no, as far as they're concerned, they're going to kill them, but they're going to do it in a much more complete way, because they're going to rain plague missiles down. And that, of course, makes what Galloway's about to do more than just, oh, I'm blowing up 3 Daleks or whatever, because I need a bit of redemption, because that's what characters like me have to do. I think all this switcheroo stuff is good. The Perineum is on the Earthship. Galloway has sequestered himself aboard the Dalek ship. The Daleks have left them alive because they're going to kill them, and they're going to basically, do a scorched earth policy on Exelon, which is, final solution. It's grim. It's very Daleks of old. But this stuff is sort of deployed quite lightly when Terry Nation does it. We just take for granted that it's in the Daleks' sort of handbook that they will, completely wipe out all life on a planet. And then we have one of my favourite things in any Doctor Who or any drama, is somebody sacrificing themselves so that everyone else can live. And I'm sure I've said it in this podcast before. It's how I want to go. I want to be mortally wounded on a spaceship and say to people, "You go, save yourselves," and I'll, crash it into the mothership or whatever. That's a simple but brilliant effect. I was very excited when I learnt how you could do that. I don't think you'd be allowed to do it these days, because it's, I think we know that this is polystyrene that's had that liquid, it's some sort of acid, isn't it, or is it nail varnish remover poured onto it, and it makes it melt. But I think it's a lovely model. It gives it a great texture. It's a classic effect. It's sometimes used for melting doors. I think there's one in the Sea Devils, isn't there? It's an old visual effects department trick, but much nicer to me than CGI. You can sort of feel it, you can see it, you can smell it. And of course we have the nice punchline about 699 wonders, because the universe used to have 700 wonders, which makes you, if you're a kid and you know about the 7 wonders of the world, which are the things that we learnt about when I was younger. There was all sorts of books that had exciting things like that. It made you think that the world was amazing, because there were things like 7 wonders of the world. I wonder if the young people today learn about them, and I think it's sad if they don't. Town, he was on the commentary for this that we did, the last Dalek standing from this, but Sai has gone from us now. The incidental music played by the London Saxophone Quartet. That's an unusual credit. I always like an unusual credit. Derek Slee, well done for your lighting, sir. Okay. Well, that is the end of Death to the Daleks, which I think that last episode is very nicely plotted. Nation has put everything in place in order that come the end, it's very satisfactorily resolved, with the perineum that's been sorted by Jill and Sarah, so they're given a job to do, and that's a lovely switcheroo that they do. And then as I say, the Daleks sparing our heroes, but only because they're going to wipe them out from a plague missile from the sky. Galloway, having got that explosive to use in a particular way, then sensibly does what he does, and then in terms of his character, does what he does to sacrifice himself, to redeem himself for his egregiousness earlier on. And Jill Tarrant just looks a bit confused throughout the whole thing, and oddly pleased in places. But so I think I have to say my favourite thing. It's interesting. I think I'm going to be all right, actually. I mean, I think I was going to say maybe my bonus thing should be the darkness and the lighting, but Dominic did do the loss of power, didn't he, at the at the beginning in episode 1 as his thing when he did the sequence of the TARDIS losing power. I do like the whole wheeze of the being, no power. I think that's I think that gives the story its sort of hook. What about if we're on a planet where the Daleks can't do anything and we can't fall back on the sort of electronics and stuff that we usually use, which is why those sort of prosaic circuit boards in the city were a bit disappointing. I do think that the design does let it down there. Sorry, Colin Green. So I could say the lighting, or that just whole thing about the lack of power, which is a good thing to have hovering over the story to give it its unique feel. I do love the self-sacrifice thing. I just think it's a storytelling essential. These sorts of dramas are absolutely chock full of them, but they always work for me. They give you a bit of a character moment. They give you a bit of a punch the air, but also a bit of a lump in the throat. And it's brave, but it's also sad, and it also helps with the plot. And so I do like a bit of self-sacrifice. It's not something I ever get sort of bored of. And I like the Watcher. I like the Observer. Even though that came to nothing, it just made those sequences, it breathed a little something extra into them that otherwise I think would have tested our patience. So yeah, maybe that's the things for me. Maybe I'll have my thing for episode 4 is the Watcher, that silent figure, because it's always a bit of a surprise to me, because it makes you expect one thing and does another. It actually has no need to be there, except it just makes it better. It makes what would have been sort of boring, slightly run-of-the-mill sequences of random jeopardy, something that also has an extra layer of expectation and atmosphere. So I think it's a useful addition for this point in the drama. And my bonus thing is Galloway's self-sacrifice, because that's just a personal thing, and it just pushes my buttons. But with honourable mention to the whole, the fact that it's a story about not just death to the Daleks, but death of the usual things that we rely on in these sorts of science fiction stories, and also the lighting from Derek Slee, which is pleasingly dark. What's Dominic chosen for part 4 and for his bonus thing?
My favourite thing from episode 4 is when the city produces antibodies. I love that idea of this living city, and they're inside the nervous system, and this living city has produced antibodies to try and kill the invaders.
Interesting. I mean, I like the fact that they look like sort of walking zombies. I like the fact that they're dusty. I like the fact that they're, they can withstand a hail of bullets that we see make impact. And all of that really works. But I just think antibodies with arms and legs don't quite work for me, even though I can rationalise it by going, well, it's a planet where the Exelons themselves are humanoid in shape, so the city would produce, all antibodies is guards, is things to, fight off infection. So why wouldn't they have arms and legs? It just seems a bit prosaic to me, and I just, as I say, I just think everything in that city seems like it's all come from different places. Even though I've just managed to rationalise it, and I do like the design, it just doesn't quite gel for me. But I'm delighted that Dominic, and I do like the explanation for it. I like the fact that Terry Nation explains it in that organic, slightly scientist way, which I think is useful for the kids, and it makes sense of how the city itself works. So yeah, no, it's good. It just I think it's not quite as the execution is not quite doesn't quite live up to this isn't quite the sum of its parts.
My bonus thing, of course, it has to be the character of Bellal. It's one of the most unique characters in all of Doctor Who for me, and it's just the way he plays it, the way the character moves. I think it's absolutely wonderful. So that's my bonus favourite thing from this story.
Well, at last, I get a point, because the way that it works is that I can't choose something after. So if Dominic had chosen Bellal for episode 3 and I hadn't, I wouldn't be able to then choose Bellal, because that is gone. But Dominic doesn't know what I'm going to choose, because I do this afterwards. So if I choose something and then he later chooses it, I do get a point. Now, The problem is, it means that I can't then get a point for this episode because it's a point I didn't get last episode. So it doesn't help me ultimately, but it does here because I came out of this with no honour whatsoever and was looking like I was going to get a big fat 0. But because of the bonus thing, and because it had to be, and I'd have been really disappointed if it hadn't, Bellal just gets me not over the line, but at least not, not without any chance of ever getting near it. So I haven't sailed through this with flying colours. I'm at least it's not a blank sheet. I've got 1 point just at the end for the marvellous Bellal, played by the wonderful Arnold Yarrow, a legend of Doctor Who, a legend of television. And he is a beautiful character, beautifully played, and one of those lovely one-offs. He's only in 2 episodes, really, and yet he's somebody that I think, everyone would say Death to the Daleks, one of the first things that they would say is that they like about it is Bellal. So it's right that he gets he gets noticed and gets me my solo point, 1 out of 5.
So there you go. If anyone else watches it, I hope you enjoy it. Stay safe. Bye.
Thanks, Dom. And he said stay safe there because I think he recorded that when we were having our own plague, COVID. So an appropriate story to be doing for when this podcast was conceived. This was to give me something to do during lockdown. And so, of course, I contacted loads of friends and built up an archive and a storehouse. So I'm sure many of them have been waiting, like the people on Earth, like Dan Galloway's family at home going, when am I going to see? And in Galloway's case, they never will. But Dominic has at least got to... I haven't blown up his contribution before it could arrive at its rightful place. But yes, he recorded that. I mean, so much has changed. We've emerged the other side. I'm not sure the world has got any better. We still have the ramifications of that time. Some good, some bad. We're still, I think, living our lives in the shadow of that, and some things that we do, including some Doctor Who things that we do, like the DVD commentaries, which are now almost always done on Zoom rather than in a studio. Not always, but most of the time. Things like this and podcasts, which certainly went on the increase when we were all locked in our houses with things to do. My output has certainly become more home-based as a result of COVID. So the ramifications of not the space plague, I can understand why it's such a serious thing, and it sheds a different light on this story. But what an appropriate story for Dominic to have been talking about, and we did indeed stay safe, and I'm pleased that we've all emerged the other side. Not everybody did, and so aren't we fortunate? So that was a bit of a blast from the past in that sense. But I have seen Dominic in the flesh since he came and did. He's come and done my comedy club since he was mastering a new trick and he needed 10 minutes, so he came and did it. So I have seen him in the flesh, but it's nice to reconnect with him. Even though this video of him was from before I reconnected with him, it's nice to reconnect with him and see him. He's gone a bit grey around. He was the young one. He was the fresh-faced one of our sketch group that we did. So he's going a bit grey around the edges. I must be. Well, I know I am. Where I'm not grey, there's nothing left. So. Time. Yes, we're all subject to a power drain, and let's keep going whilst we've still got energy. I really enjoyed revisiting Death to the Daleks. I don't think I don't think I've come out with it with a different opinion on most of its key elements. It has reassured me that my instinct that it was better than I'd originally thought it was from my first sort of 10-15 years of knowing it, and that's a sign that I've got over some of the feelings I had about the Pertwee era and some of the disappointment I had about stories having read the Target books and then them not living up to expectations because 70s television can't. But also I think it has some delights all its own, some uniquenesses that make it special, which is why it's a delight to visit every single Doctor Who story, because they all have their own bespoke aspects that make them unique within the canon, and that's why it's such an exciting show to revisit, because whatever mood you're in, that a story might give you something that another story can't. And I think sometimes I think of the Pertwee era in particular as a sort of amorphous glob of stories that are all a bit overlong, are all slightly compromised in their staging, and that their ambitions mean that they have a couple of isolated action sequences and then lots of padding, and I think that's not entirely untrue, but actually what it does mean is that every story has some nice set pieces. This one's usually involve fire and arrows, but actually the individual directors come and add all sorts of joys to proceedings, and Michael Bryant, I think, does his best, particularly in, I think, the first couple of installments, to make the show and to make the Exelons, who could have been awful, really interesting and spooky and offbeat and upsetting. So Michael Bryant deserves an awful lot of credit. It also has things that don't quite work. As I say, some of that design, the music, which I like. I'm fond of the music, but I'm not sure I should be fond of the soundtrack to a story about the deadliest creatures in the universe. But there's plenty there to love about Death to the Daleks. And as I say, this revisit has just consolidated my view that it's better than I've generally thought of it as being. I've really enjoyed receiving other people's feedback, people fond of it, and because of how important those VHS releases were. And that's another part of Doctor Who history, and now we're in the thick of another, as we're anticipating the release of the next Blu-ray box set, and that's become something that fandom talks about and has opinions on. And in 20 years' time we will be talking about when that box set came out and which bits we liked and which bits we didn't, and then I'll be saying, well, we made this and we nearly made that, and that becomes part of the tapestry and the stuff that we write about. But Death to the Daleks, for a particular generation, and it was because it was one of the first, that the novelty hadn't quite worn off. It was a VHS, and it was a way into old Who for a lot of people, or it was the first one people had been able to see from the archives, or amongst the first, because it was in that early batch of VHS releases. So that gives it its own little place and its own little packaging in Doctor Who history, and that is all part of it. It's not just about the stories; it's about where they land, what they mean, how we first discovered them, when we first discovered them, how old we were, what we were doing, and the exploitation of the brand, the fact that it keeps being reintroduced to us in different ways. There was the odd repeat, then there were the VHSs, then there were the DVDs, then it went on to iPlayer. So all these different ways that different people can find Doctor Who, and isn't that wonderful? And maybe one day somebody will listen to this first, having not seen, because I sometimes listen to podcasts about things I haven't seen or have only seen once and haven't revisited, and it will inspire somebody to either visit for the first time, or more likely maybe give a go to a story that they haven't seen in a long, long time. And I know a couple of correspondents have said that, it's put me in the mood to watch it, and I hope it puts you in the mood to watch it and realise that even in even in their death, the Daleks have something to offer, and that it's a story, like all Doctor Who stories, that if you go into it with an attitude that you're going to enjoy it, it will reward you again and again and again. And I think that's an optimistic note to end on. So thanks very much. Thanks to Dominic Woodward, and thanks to you for listening. And I will see you next time as we try to add to the 699 wonders of the universe. Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock. My special guest this time around was the comedian, actor, magician and children's entertainer Dominic Woodward, who can be found on Twitter at Dominic Woodward. I'm grateful to my old mate Dom and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, John Babb, Tim Arding, Nigel Bromley, Richard Chalk, Paul Cook, Peter Chamberlain, Grant Davidson, John Deere, Chris Dunford-Kelk, Paul Dunn, El Pandras, Susie Ferguson, Jason Gorman, Siobhan Galichon, Paul Harris, Chris Hyam, Ian Key, Ashley Knight, Joe Llewellyn, Ian K. McLachlan, Philip Marsh, Nathan Martin, Roland Moore, Rick Moran, Kevin Murdoch, Graham Knott, Adam Parker, Barry Platt, Risto Matti Sorillo and Frank Shales. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like your name read out on the credits, well, become a patron of these podcasts and all of my other output, which you can do by going to patreon.com/Toby Haydock, where for as little as £3 a month, you get advance releases, bonus material. You usually get 3 things, 3 audio or visual Doctor Who related or comedy related things per week. It's mostly Doctor Who related. I should put more comedy stuff out there really, but I worry that you only want me for the sci-fi. So it's mostly Doctor Who-y or sci-fi stuff, and it's these, but early. But there are exclusives. There are monthly AMAs, which are just for patrons. There's Far Too Much Information, which is an occasional podcast that goes beyond Too Much Information, which gives extra details, and Too Much Information itself is usually 2 or 3 episodes ahead now. I hope I've got it like that, and I'm trying to get Happy Times and Places back to being about 6 months ahead. It's probably only 2 or 3 months at the moment, but that's changing. So yeah, there's lots of reasons, and £3 a month is a month, and everything's available pretty much at that lowest tier. Certainly all of the podcast style content is all there. All of the output is there from £3 a month, but the tiers do go up, and you also get a 10% discount if you sign up for a year in one go. Or you can just do the occasional one-off contribution at Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock. It's sort of like buying me a coffee if you've liked a particular podcast or are feeling especially flush for that month but don't want to have a monthly commitment, and I understand that. But if you enjoy listening and would prefer to spend your money elsewhere, and that is totally understandable, what you can do that costs you nothing but a little of your time is to go to everywhere you can get these: Spotify, Podbean, particularly Apple and iTunes and YouTube, and subscribe and like and rate these with 5 stars and give a few lines of review saying what you like about them. And also, just spread the word, and let's get more people listening, because the more people are listening, well, I mean, it just justifies me sitting in a cupboard chatting away into the ether and hoping that somebody is interested. I'm on social media at Toby Haydock for Twitter/X, also at Haydock Podcasts, which is just stuff about these podcasts. I'm at Toby.Haydock on Instagram. I have a Facebook page, and I have a website, www.tobyhaydock.com. So yeah, all of those things are where you can find details of the comedy stuff that I do, the TV programs I'm occasionally in, the live comedy work, the writing that I do as well, and the radio stuff as well. I fling stuff out there, and I hope it's of interest. And any sort of traffic my internet presence gets just helps me to push myself out there really, and hopefully do more of this stuff and on bigger platforms. That's all one can hope for. And so there we are. That's the end of Death to the Daleks. I've been a bit poorly myself this week, so I know how those plague people feel in Death to the Daleks. It's felt a very appropriate one to do. So I'm going to take my thick head and sit on the sofa and have a lemsip. But I wanted to get this last one in the can because I know that some people have been watching along, and that's delightful, isn't it? It does really. It's a weird because television is not scheduled so much anymore, and nobody watches anything at the same time in the way that you used to with water cooler moments. It's actually nice having something where, you know that a few people have done something in pretty much the same time as you, so you're having a shared experience, even though it's an individual experience, and everyone, as you heard from the comments that I opened each episode with, and I like it when my laziness means I have time to do that, because in the old days I could sometimes do a whole story in one go. Maybe I'm just getting too old now, but that's okay because it means I get the feedback, and so it means like feels like I'm watching it with a gang, even though I'm not. And I'll put stuff out there and people will come and either correct me or give a different viewpoint, or support my viewpoint, or just say that they've enjoyed revisiting and hearing the thoughts of others. And so yes, it sounds oxymoronic, but we watch very much and curate our individual viewing pleasure these days, but we can make it that it becomes a communal thing. It's just a new way of doing things, isn't it? And that's we're just adjusting to the perhaps more sort of closed off life that we now live, and that's technology. But COVID probably did have an effect, or speeded up some of that, or recharacterized some of that. And certainly live comedy and live entertainment and things that everybody go to at the same time are not the same. They're not as well attended, and actually I wouldn't want to go to the cinema now because people seem to have forgotten how to behave at cinemas, and even on public transport where people don't even bother with headphones anymore. So I feel myself needing to get shut in more and more, and it's not because I don't like people. I see the best in people, but they don't half let me down a lot. So it's very nice to be this sort of, I'm a sort of hermit who desires company, and this seems to me to be the perfect way of doing it. I'm having a conversation with you without any of you answering back, but then you'll send me little comments and things that mean that we can have a conversation, but whilst I'm also able to do a monologue. I mean, that's perfect. God, I'm insufferable.